Hello, my name is Rob, and today I will be talking about Bill 5, which is in the committee, and I will be giving a reaction to Bill 5, which is known as Protect Ontario by Unleashing All Economy Act 2025. Proposed legislation often goes to committees, and I thought it would be good to look at a committee. Let's see. I'm just going to go to switch screens, and this is the notice of committee, and there will be public hearings on May 22nd and May 26th. And then if you wish to send a written submission, you can do so by 6 p.m. on May 26th. And let me see, I'm just going to see if I have a live notification on. Yes, I do. The committee hasn't started yet, so I can show who is coming up. I'm just getting my chat set up. This legislation will significantly change environmental legislation. I'm just getting my other screen set up so I can monitor all the comments. Yeah. So now I can watch any of the comments that are coming in. Yeah, so that's the notice. It's on the government committee's webpage. It's in Standing Committee on Ontario. And let's see. Oh, the agenda. So 10 a.m. there will be a Minister of Energy and Mines, Stefan Lecce. 11 a.m. the Ontario Mining Association, Sandy Lake First Nation, and the Toronto Zoo, and then there will be a recess. I don't think I'll be able to cover all of this. I might stop at 12. I am Gold Corporation, Nishnawbe Oshkosh Nation, Municipality of Chatham-Kent, Christopher Monas, Anishinaabeg Nation, Energy Stores Canada, Greater Sudbury Chamber of Commerce, Walpole Island First Nation, Queen's Ross Gold, Timmins Chamber of Commerce, Robertson Huron Wandamangawan, and Canadian Renewable Energy Association. That's for today. It's subject to change. Oh, I will. Oh, so they're getting ready. Looks like they're just talking. So, okay, so I have desktop audio and the audio from the computer. Okay, so this is committee room 151. Let's see. So this should start shortly. Oh, I'll probably get the music. Okay. So it should start shortly. They're sitting on a square table. Shaking hands. Oh, Stephen Nutshey is there. Okay, so I'll turn the volume. I don't really want the music playing. Oh, what happened? I had it. Let's fix that. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay. Thought I lost it for a second. Oh, there's a camera person setting up. Why does it not show the live chat? Does this allow? Oh. I'm just going to put on a break. Transition.
Through the chair. Mr. Mamakwa has indicated that he may be speaking in Ojibwe during these hearings. There will be simultaneous interpretation to English and French. Members may use the earpieces at their seats to tune into English or French channels for interpretation. For any audience members, there are portable listening devices that will also allow you to tune into English or French interpretation. Kindly remember to return the device before you leave the hearings today. Are there any questions before we begin? MPP Mamakwa.
Miigwech, thank you, Chair. I have a motion that I'm going to read out. I move that the committee meet for an additional day of public hearings on Bill 5, an act to
I like that.
the Special Economic Zones Act 2025 to amend the Endangered Species Act 2007 and to replace it with the Special Species Conservation Act 2025 and to amend various acts and revoke various regulations in relation to development and to procurement on the following date, Thursday, May 29th, 2025. That the hearings take place in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and that the clerk of the committee be authorized to immediately post notices regarding the hearings on the Ontario Parliamentary Channel and on the Legislative Assembly's website, and that the deadline for request to appear for hearings in Thunder Bay be 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday, May 26, 2025, and that witnesses shall be scheduled and permitted to participate in person or remotely in the same manner as agreed to in the committee's previous scheduling motion on Bill 5, and that the clerk of the committee shall provide a list of all interested presenters to each member of the subcommittee on committee business and their designate as soon as possible following the deadline for requests to appear. And that if all requests to appear cannot be accommodated, each member of the subcommittee or their designate may provide the clerk of the committee with the prioritized list of presenters to be scheduled, chosen from the list of all interested presenters for those respective hearings by 2 p.m. on Tuesday, May 27, 2025. And that the deadline for written submissions be changed from 6 p.m. on Monday, May 26, 2025 to 6 p.m. on Thursday, May 29, 2025. And that the legislative research provide the committee members with a summary of oral presentations and written submissions as soon as possible following the written submission deadline. And that the deadline for filing amendments to the bill be changed from 7 p.m. on Monday, May 26, 2025 to 2 p.m. on Monday, June 2nd, 2025, and that the committee's meetings for clause by clause consideration of Bill 5 be changed from Wednesday, May 28, 2025 to Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025 from 9 a.m. until 10:15 a.m. and from 1 p.m. until 6 p.m. and from 7 p.m. until midnight. And that the subcommittee on committee business be authorized to revise hearing dates, deadlines, and clause by clause consideration of the bill if necessary. Miigwech.
Yeah, I like this.
MPP Mawaka has moved a motion. Is there any debate? Yes, MPP Gal West.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I support the motion, obviously. I was just thinking last night, MPP Mamakwa had called me during the drive down just to make sure I was going to make it on time. And we couldn't connect because I was outside of Innisville. And there are dead zones all the way between Queen's Park and my riding of Sudbury for cell phone service. I know that people can deputize, come here virtually, but in the far north, there's a lot of areas where they don't have high-speed internet, they don't have internet access. During the last mining bill, Bill 71, in the previous session, we went to Sudbury and Timmins, but a lot of conversation around this bill has to do with the Ring of Fire, and I think that it makes sense for us to go to a riding in an area that is close to people who live near that riding, so they're able to come down the same way that people from my riding are able to come to Toronto in a reasonable effort to make it. And so I think it makes sense if we're going to be talking about Northern Ontario, which my member from the north reminds me that Sudbury is not quite in Northern Ontario, that we make an effort to move up towards where these resources are and the people who are going to be affected by bills like this are living. Thank you, Chair.
MPP Clever?
I also want to speak in support of this motion. This Bill 5 is one of the makes a profound change to the way that the government operates by allowing any minister to override municipal and provincial laws and bylaws. And this should not be done without proper public consultation, without an opportunity for people in different parts of this province to be able to speak to it. So I fully support this motion. I hope everybody on this committee will vote in favor of this motion to allow community members from Northern Ontario to have an opportunity to speak about this profound change that's incumbent or inherent in Bill 5.
Further debate? MPP Tasso?
Sal. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to express my support for this motion being put forward by MP Mawako. I think we shouldn't ignore the gravity of what we're discussing today. It's a substantial bill. So these 2 days already, I think, is just not enough. And we also have to be mindful of the impact, as my colleagues mentioned, about the people that this bill will have a direct impact on. So we owe it to them to get to the north, to actually have an opportunity to speak directly to this in their communities. So I will be supporting this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Further debate? Okay. Is everyone ready to vote?
All those in favor. Pardon? Can you just say all those in favor?
Favor?
MPP West, MPP Mamakwa, MPP Sao.
All those against?
Opposed.
Opposed?
MPP Cusetto, MPP Dowie, MPP Scott Sault Ste. Marie, MPP Vickers, MPP Free.
Motion is lost.
Oh, that's disappointing.
I will now call on Minister Stephen Lecce as the sponsor of the bill. You will have 20 minutes to make an opening statement, followed by 39 minutes of questions from the members of the committee. The questions will be divided into 2 rounds of 6 and a half minutes for the government members. 2 rounds of 6 and a half minutes for the official opposition members, and 2 rounds of 6 and a half minutes for the third party. I will provide reminders of the time remaining during the presentations and questions.
Just recognize Mr.
Minister Stephen Lecce.
Okay, good morning. Thank you all colleagues for this opportunity. Thank you, Chair. I want to acknowledge Minister Greg Bickford, Ontario's Minister of Indigenous Affairs and First Nation Economic Reconciliation. I want to welcome Susanna Laxonen-Craig, the Deputy Minister of Energy and Mines, Susan Hallett, the Director of Mineral Development Program Administration Modernization Branch, Chloe Stewart, the ADM for Land and Water Division from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, Lisa Trevisan, the Assistant Deputy Minister, Environmental Assessment and Permissions Division, who's with us virtually, Tiffany Ma, who's the Director of Corporate and Policy Services, the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, also virtually with us, and Tim Christie, the Director of Electricity Policy, Economics and State and System Planning Branch, which is with us virtually, and Council is with us as well. And I would ask, Chair, that those members of the public service be allowed to join us at the table to answer questions germane to the bill. Honourable colleagues, it is a pleasure to stand before you with Minister Rickford at Standing Committee on the Interior to highlight the importance of Bill 5, the Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act, a bill that, if passed, will implement several strategic measures that unlock our true economic potential as a province. As you all know, we are facing economic threats like we've never seen before. And this bill gives government the strategic tools necessary to take back control of our economy and to position us as a global energy superpower that we are. From Madam Chair, the jolting policy choices of the Trump administration has led to devastating impacts across North American markets. Our biggest and closest ally, ostensibly once our closest friend to the south, our largest trading partner, has launched a trade war with a deliberate intent to weaken our economy, which raises a public policy question we have to answer today. How do we ensure self-reliance is achieved across the board? For a president who is elected to restore the American economy, to create jobs, make the U.S. prosper, he's doing quite the opposite at the expense of Canadians and, frankly, his own citizens. I mean, look at the stock markets. The S&P 500 lost 7.9% since he took office. That's $11 trillion of value, the worst since the 1970s. We know that U.S. tariffs are taking direct aim at our economy, but our government is not going to back down. This is a promise we made from the beginning and we intend to keep. A promise that we made to protect workers, to protect families and businesses. Because as the global landscape shifts, it is this government, led by our Premier, that is acting decisively to secure our future.
Oh, no,
it's why we introduced this legislation, Madam Chair. We know Ontario has everything the U.S. needs and the world needs. And frankly, we have what the world needs in large quantums. As the global markets turn away from oppressive regimes like China, we know that Ontario is positioned to lead. Over 50% of the world's coal electricity comes from China alone. In 2024, China started construction on 94.5 gigawatts of coal-fired plants. Madam Speaker, I'm mentioning this because the World Economic Forum states that China is responsible for 80% of the world's rare earths. The world is looking for options to supply the necessary critical minerals to build a clean energy economy. And so, is it us or is it them? And the world will need to rely on China when Ontario, if we don't step up, that's where many markets will rely on for critical mineral supports. We are one of the most mineral-rich regions on the planet. Key resources like nickel, titanium, cobalt, lithium However, this bounty of critical minerals we have has been directly tied to bureaucratic delay imposed by government. And for years, we had the former Liberal government, respectively, that did so much to undermine the wealth of our province by keeping these resources in the ground. And through this legislation, Madam Chair, we want to move forward. Yes, in partnership. But allow me to share some statistics with my colleagues today. In the Philippines, in Australia, in the European Union, they open mines faster than Ontario. In Australia, it takes 27 months to grant a mining application start to finish. And yet in this province, it can take upwards of 15 years. And I'm talking about comparable democratic industrialized economies as the comparator. So when we're facing one of the most erratic opponents we've ever faced, the status quo is unacceptable. And that is the position of this government. We went in a campaign socializing the idea of speed as a strength in this moment of time.
So they're going to decimate
And I believe
endangered
Canadians know
species.
this. I mean, according to the federal government, 90% of Canadians support an investment plan to grow the economy, to drive Canadian industries, to repatriate jobs to the province. And the data released from the Mining Association of Canada shows that 83% of Canadians understand the need for more mining projects. 80% say they want a stronger mining sector to propel the long-term health of our economy as Canadians. And so, Madam Chair, when we directly look at Ontario in 2024, the Ontario Mining Association poll shows 60% of Ontarians see mining as an industry of the future, 86% in Northern Ontario see mining as an industry of the future. We know this. And the Public Policy Forum released a report last week alone that effectively states that if Canada wants to build big things, and I'm going to quote from the report, they have to, quote, scale up our own ambitions, harness our abundance of natural resources, and get its economic house in much better order, tasks that are long overdue. Speaking about the Federation, but it applies to the provinces too. Now, Madam Chair, according to the same report, Canada is the second slowest within the OECD, within the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. We are the second slowest when it comes to granting permits. And it begs the question, how is that acceptable? How could any parliamentarian in this new world order say we should allow the status quo to prevail? And I think this disjointed system requires an element of leadership and courage to confront the big challenges facing the country. Now, colleagues, part of this transformation is the idea that we're proposing the first of its kind one project, one process framework. That is at the crux of this bill. It is what it's designed to do, to put accountability on government, on the public service, on politicians, to make decisions, to do it in a timely manner, to allow us to attract investment, not deter global investment because of the Wild West that can sometimes take place, where it could take thousands of days with no accountability, no mechanism to drive a decision. So yes, we believe in imposing benchmarks that are publicly facing. 50% reduction. That is the ambition. Now, this new approach will deliver a white glove concierge service to work with the project proponents, Indigenous communities, to directly reduce the delays and come up with a more cogent process to move these permits through. It starts with a dedicated mine authorization and permitting delivery team. This will be led in the Ministry of Energy and Mines, and they're going to really guide the proponents through this permitting process. They're going to create what's called an integrated permitting plan, a mature, comprehensive plan at the front end of the application that will be developed, incorporating all the approvals necessary across multi-ministries, really from the beginning of the process. The process will create a strategic roadmap. It will secure permits in a streamlined and sensible way that allows the project to move faster. We will no longer allow outdated processes to hold back our province's potential. And that is the basis of the bill overwhelmingly, to create that speed, efficiency, and accountability. Now, not only this, Madam Chair, but we're also implementing benchmarks, as I mentioned, service standards, in effect, to hold us in government account. Under the current process, there are a few deadlines the government has with respect to mining applications, and the few service standards that were in place were not being met. So that ends with this legislation. And every permit, every authorization will have a review deadline that must be met. Madam Chair, this is a decisive approach that gives mining investors and industry and communities and Indigenous peoples the certainty they need to make multi-million or billion-dollar investments. We're giving them confidence to invest in Ontario, not in spite of, but because of a nimble regulatory system that can be better. This process delivers shovels in the ground faster and will help us build the jobs, the self-reliant, economically sovereign nation I think all parliamentarians here today want. But you can't want it without a plan to achieve it. Otherwise, it's just a talking point. And we actually have a policy before us that enables that aspiration that I think unites parliamentarians. Economic self-reliance is fundamental to our future. And so we've got to get on with building. We cannot be the last. And so, friends, when we speak a bit about the opportunity to drive economic growth through the creation of special economic zones that the Minister of Economic Development has brought forth, proposed in this legislation, it gives us tools to strategically deploy in geographic areas of importance led by trusted partners that will benefit from a streamlined requirement to accelerate the permits there too. Now, as you know, Ontario has one of the world's largest untapped critical mineral deposits, the Ring of Fire. That has the potential to build prosperity in the north, add billions of dollars to our provincial and national economy, to literally create tens of thousands of jobs for Canadians. And we're not going to allow or follow the process of governments of the past whose delays in inaction and bureaucratic red tape drove companies to abandon multi-billion-dollar investments. You see, Madam Chair, if the historic legislation is passed, we intend to designate the Ring of Fire with its world-class deposits of critical minerals as the first such special economic zone, signaling its long-term strategic importance to the province, and we will do so in consultation and collaboration. But we've taken our efforts one step further. Not only are we going to extract those precious metals, last week and just yesterday, we announced through our budget, for the first time in our history, we're investing $500 million in new critical mineral processing fund to ensure we end the ripping and shipping that currently occurs in our mineral sector to create value-added jobs here in Ontario and Canada. And so we can create those jobs and the better paychecks that we want for Canadians. But I know, and I know Minister Rickford would emphasize this, that, and I want to go on the record on this, this is about partnership with Indigenous leaders and local First Nation communities. And let us be abundantly clear to assure all involved, this bill does not impede or supersede Ontario's constitutional duty to consult obligations. In fact, colleagues, it is why it is codified in the schedules of the bill before you today.
I disagree.
Under Schedule 5, any service standard implemented as a result of Bill 5 will be non-applicable to the government's duty to consult obligations. Moreover, our government intends to amend the preamble of this bill to clearly, unequivocally reaffirm the government's constitutional obligation to Indigenous partners and First Nation communities, ensuring that this core obligation stands among the very first words in the legislation. And this comes after the work by Ontario Regional Chief
Preambles
Abram
have no
Benedict
legal
and my
effect.
colleague Minister Rickford, who I'd like to personally express gratitude to them, because we want to demonstrate we are listening to advance the cause of economic reconciliation and economic development as a Team Canada approach. And we will respect Indigenous rights. And that is why we've built upon it, and we're committing to intent to strengthen it in the bill as per an amendment by government. Because, colleagues, the bottom line is our government remains committed to consulting, committed to working in partnership. It's why yesterday the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Indigenous Affairs,
eliminated
Minister of
environmental
Training Colleges and Universities, and
registry requirements.
announced
So that's not true.
$3.1 billion to support the First Nation Partnership in Critical Mineral Development. This includes, germane to the issue of the duty to consult, a 260% increase in the Indigenous Participation Fund, which singularly enables capacity building of First Nation communities to navigate the duty to consult. They asked for this. We're delivering this. And we're not doing it, we're doing it simply because we recognize we want to aid in moving the consultations forward and giving that capacity to those communities that need it most. And we also announced $10 million for scholarship for the next generation of First Nation young people to pursue education in the space. That's wonderful. But I do want to emphasize the $70 million which enables participation in the duty to consult. Fundamental. It's not just about the bill that codifies, it's that we're putting money on the table to deliver it. And so we believe in developing our province in meaningful partnership with partners. And it has to revolve around fairness and respect. We recognize the unique opportunity to unlock the potential, not just of the economics of the North, to enhance the economic health, the social outcomes of the North. We recognize that investments, social infrastructure must be delivered in order to build out the North. We get that. We're there. We've already have a proven record of delivering upon that. But we know there must be more to come. So when it comes to the duty to consult, each ministry is holding separate conversations about their components of the application, and we know that there's a way we can deliver through the one project, one process framework, more integration in how these concepts and projects get moved through government, opposed to this piecemeal approach of multi-ministries getting different requests, different permits, literally multiple ships not talking in the night. There's no synergization of government. There's no overarching person responsible for bringing these things together, thus allowing us to be among the worst permitting regimes on earth. So it is a critical step, and it's about time the government does it. But in addition to standing up for economic development and economic reconciliation, we have to also safeguard Canadian resources and keep them in Canadian hands. And I believe this is a real threat from foreign adversaries who seek control of our mineral assets. And in the bill,
There's no mention about
it is. I should note
species
that
so far.
the Canadian Security Intelligence Agency, CSIS, has explicitly warned that Canada's resources are rich targets for foreign interference. And under the current legislative framework, pre-Bill 5, there are no specific tools to stop a hostile foreign regime or actor from registering or acquiring mining claims in the North. That is ludicrous. And the legislation introduces vital amendments to the Mining Act that grants new authorities to government to protect our Canadian strategic mineral resources. This includes the authority to restrict the transfer of a mining claim or deny the issuance of a lease to prevent the acquisition by hostile actors, as well as to suspend the processing of claims or other transactions within what's called the MLAS, the Mining Lands Administration System. And when necessary, yes, have the authority to suspend or remove a specific registrant from MLAS altogether if they are identified by a threat, not by government, by our security agencies informed by the Ministry of the Solicitor General. These are necessary tools. This is about protecting our country, safeguarding our resources, putting us on a path of self-reliance. But these provisions are not intended to target any foreign investment. It's about protecting us from foreign exploitative bad actors. It's about bolstering Ontario's reputation as a responsible, sustainable mining jurisdiction with world-class environmental labor standards. There is no one that has. These are the gold standards of protection. And we're not going to encourage investment from countries who are, we're not going to discourage investment from these countries, from the Australians or the Brazilians or the Swiss. Like, we want that investment to keep flowing. They know that. We've delivered that message. This is not about them. I think we all know who we're targeting in this plan. But those identified as threats to the strategic mineral resource supply chain, or they work on behalf of an adversarial actor like a state-owned enterprise, then simply point, you're not going to get your hands on Canadian resources. Now, I want to speak about the energy infrastructure components of this bill because the landscape is changing, escalating cyber threats, increasing sophisticated state-sponsored actors. It is essential we safeguard our energy policy, too, from vulnerability. Part of this bill does that. The tools we have to address foreign state influence in critical areas of the energy sector are inadequate. In today's new world, I think we get this. I think we all get this. We've got to smarten up as Canadians, protect our own, protect our critical infrastructure from foreign risk. And the bill now empowers government through legislative specific reg-making authority to limit foreign state-owned or state-controlled companies from specific jurisdictions from participating in designated parts of Ontario's energy sector. The objective is seeking authority. In seeking this authority is clear. Proactively protect our energy sector from a wide range of risk. Ensuring security, resilience, sovereign provincial control of our energy grid is a fundamental responsibility of government, and this proposed measure provides a critical modern tool to help. Not only is it ensuring the security of our grid, but ensuring we meet the continued growth and demand as well. And colleagues, the government remains committed to working collaboratively with all sectors to advance energy generation and transmission and storage and distribution, building the strong, clean energy economy we want to see for our country. So if this bill passes, it will implement measures specifically aimed at streamlining development of priority energy projects. It will create a formal process to identify, to prioritize energy projects that are strategically important, that integrates them into permitting and approval process that are all across all relevant
Two minutes
industries.
remaining, Minister.
Sorry.
2 minutes remaining.
2 minutes. Okay. So, in conclusion, I will say the legislation seeks for the first time for government to get out of the way, to allow us to move with speed in this moment. The federal government, which does not share our party, parties across the provincial spectrum have come to a realization. Speed is a strength in the moment, but we will do so with real benchmarks in place, a 50% reduction in the time it takes to approve a permit, designating a new central point of contact through the Ministry of Energy and Mines to shepherd these projects from start to finish, all while enhancing competitiveness, unleashing our economic potential, and respecting the Constitution. We will get critical minerals out of the ground. We will do it in partnership, and will ensure that Canadian resources stay in the hands of Canadians. And it works. It starts today, creating the conditions so we can work collaboratively with the private sector, with First Nation leaders, of course, and communities and municipalities, and the workers to responsibly build our resource economy that benefits all. This is critical legislation. It's an important step forward in our province. And with that, Madam Chair, I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Minister. The first round of questions, we will start with the government members.
Government
And
members,
I go
okay.
to MPP Dowie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for your presentation. As you likely heard many times from me in the last number of years, my community of Windsor-Tecumseh has an unemployment rate that actually just hit 10.7%. And one of the best partnerships of recent memory between the federal and provincial governments and many stakeholders was the Nexstar Energy EV battery plant. And it's a perfect example of what you cited as a white glove treatment of all levels of government working together to expedite a project. And we landed that project. And had we not had the white glove service with the great involvement of the Ministry of the Environment and Conservation and Parks, the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, and many, many others, we would not have landed that plant, and the people in my community would be looking at an even higher prospective unemployment rate today. And on top with that, I also received some criticism for that white glove treatment because the properties next door have looked at 3, 4, 5 years of ongoing dialogue as to how to achieve an end date for the implementation of their permissions to develop. And they look at the Nexstar project and say, why them and not us? Is it because of the magnitude of the investment? And is there no place for smaller businesses and local businesses to benefit from the same? And I understand, having gone through that process, I used to be, in my past career, the regulator as the drainage superintendent. Nexstar site had 2 municipal drains with the environmental permissions that come with that. And these certainly need to be addressed. There are species out there that need to be protected, but we have an increasing complexity of environmental and infrastructure challenges. And honestly, if we can't pick winners and losers if we're going to have a successful economy and address our unemployment challenges.
That's exactly what they're
with
doing
this
with endangered
bill,
species.
the
They're
government
using
proposes
political
sweeping
decisions,
reform
not
of a
scientific.
suite of regulations to streamline the approval processes for certainly key resource projects, as you mentioned, for mining and energy. Undoubtedly, it has impacts on our local projects too, and the environmental assessment process for municipalities, which also I have a fair amount of experience leading and directing in my past career. So I know that doing better is essential for us to not lose investments like the Nexstar EV battery plant and its supplier plants and many, many others that will create jobs for the people of my community. So I'm hoping you might be able to respond with how this legislation will ensure a balance between economic growth and robust environmental protections and create a pathway to development that is both responsible and sustainable?
I appreciate the question. I should just first say there are, in this new world order, we are now competing with the United States increasingly to onshore jobs. He has a stated, explicit policy intention to undermine our economy for the benefit of America. This is the first time in my life that we can really say we now need, as a country, existentially, to figure out a path of self-reliance. It's not about one element of self-reliance to the exclusion of everything. It's an across-the-board application of the principle. I mean, colleagues, in the Ministry of Energy, we have brought forth policies to decouple procurements from America and China. We have brought forth measures to invest in Canadian critical mineral production so that we have value-added jobs here and we deny hostile regimes or competitors the value-added jobs we ought to be creating at home. So when it comes to the environment, this is important. I think it is important for all parliamentarians and for all Ontarians to hear loud and clear. The government of Ontario and Canada has among literally the highest standards of environmental protection on earth. And it is important those elements are safeguarded,
believe that.
which is why in the bill before you, it is proposed through my colleague, the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks, a enhancement of compliance and enforcement, meaningful enhancement. We're talking about jail time for non-compliance. I mean, the message of zero tolerance cannot be more manifested in a signal that we will and can impose jail time, maximum penalties in the millions, should individuals or businesses violate the law. We care deeply about this, and that's why we, upon our own volition, strengthen the protection and the enforcement. We have authorities that didn't exist before. Now, conservation officers could be deployed without
But they
notice
weaken the law as well,
into a
especially with
project.
habitat.
That is strength. That is a value prop that we didn't have before. So I accept the premise. It's strength. The environment must be protected, but so too must our economic interests of the province. And I would reject, as some will try to make it seem like you got to pick a lane. We pick both. I totally reject this premise that you cannot grow the economy while protecting the environment. And respectfully, when we as legislators had options, including in the last mining bill, that did not include anything on environment, species at risk, waste management, none of these things were codified. Even then, not all parliamentarians, in fact, only our government was able to get to yes on approving, on accepting that we need to move quicker on building mining. So you speak about a project in your community that benefited from that, but we know not all businesses. In fact, the majority of businesses do not benefit because that policy, that framework doesn't exist. One project, one process
Minister, that
needs to be
ends
our
round
reality.
one set of questions for the government side. We will now move to round one questions for the official opposition. And I look to MPP Mamawakwa.
Miigwech, Chair. I got a question to the Minister of Energy and Mines. What is your understanding of treaties with First Nations?
Well, obviously, it is the government's intent to fully respect the Constitution. And that meaning that everything we do with respect to Indigenous communities, that there's a full, meaningful consultation with respect to the duty to consult. And so we clearly intend to respect treaties and to respect the law. And of course, I may turn to the Minister of Indigenous Affairs.
No. I know earlier this month I visited the Archives of Ontario to see the Ontario government's copy of Treaty Number 9, the James Bay Treaty, along with its adhesions from 1929 and 1930. Treaty 9 is the only treaty with Ontario's signature on it. Can you explain in detail what Treaty 9 means to Ontario, particularly in your role as a Minister of Energy and Mines?
I'd like to ask the Minister Bickford to respond.
I would have liked to hear your perspective as a Minister of Mines and Energy.
What I've mentioned to my colleague is that we will fully respect the treaties, fully respect the Constitution, and so much so, in addition to the codification of that principle in the law that we're proposing, the proposed legislation before the House, we are strengthening it in the preamble. So we are committed to fulfilling the obligations of the Crown with respect to that nation-to-nation dialogue. We understand the importance. It is protected and enshrined in the Constitution, and the Government of Ontario will fully discharge the obligations that government has. And I really do believe, and I want to assure the member this, which is why we're taking a step to strengthen that commitment in the preamble. But I would like to turn to the Minister of Indigenous Affairs because this is a collaborative effort, and obviously his perspective is important.
Yeah, thanks for the question and the opportunity. Obviously, the Ring of Fire is in Treaty 9, but so have been some other major resource developments. I think as we reflect upon those, I'm thinking in particular of the De Beers mine site on the coast. Sadly, there was a lack of contour to considering the communities proximal to these sites as key areas to develop alongside the development of a resource project. And so what did that leave us with? Well, in the case of Attawapiskat, I think it's well documented. And the comment at the time, I was the federal minister of natural resources, was that no government should develop or be in the business of developing a major resource project without developing First Nations communities proximal to it. So I think we're talking about an opportunity here. There are other examples across or around Treaty 9 that remind us that a coherent and comprehensive engagement with First Nations communities. Sorry.
I'd like to ask another question. Like, you're not answering my question. You're just blowing smoke. You know, and so I want to. Yeah. So anyway, I want to ask another question.
Sorry, excuse me,
Yes,
MPP Mawaka.
Okay.
Please speak through the chair.
Okay.
If you don't mind. Thank you very much.
Okay, what is your position on or understanding of Aboriginal title? Aboriginal title, what is your understanding and what is your position on it? Yeah.
So I just would continue with your previous question on with respect to Treaty 9 and how Aboriginal title interacts with the treaties. Obviously, there have been a number of claims, particularly in the last 6 years, land claims and flooding claims that have respected and considered things like Aboriginal title and the treaties. So Treaty 3 comes to mind, Treaty 9 comes to mind. And as the Minister had pointed out, the bill is explicit in terms of its duty to consult, specific to an economic zone. And I believe a comprehensive approach to not just consultation for the purposes of checking that box, but for real engagement and accommodation for First Nations communities in and around any proposed resource development site.
Recognize MPP Mawaka.
I only got less than a minute. I just want to say to both of the ministers, Do you understand that this bill, with this bill, you're not honoring the treaties, but you are actually, do you know that you're actually violating them?
With the greatest of respect, I disagree with that. I think it not only honors the treaty, but it's explicit in its additional efforts to accomplish two things.
That is the end of round two questions for the official opposition. Questions now to the third party. And I recognize MPP Zhao.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I want to start by saying thank you to the ministers for being here today to take questions from the committee. Ministers, and through you, Chair, ministers, I say Ontarians want businesses to thrive and to go faster, as you say, Minister. I think that's without question. But what the concern here is creating the conditions for a race to the bottom. What we see in this bill is really a reckless plan to override laws, silence consultation, and fast-track development. So I want to ask you, Minister, specifically about Schedule 9 of Bill 5, and why you believe it's necessary to designate trusted proponents to be exempt from the Occupational Health and Safety Act or the Safe Drinking Water Act or the Food Safety and Quality Act. Why is that necessary in Bill 5?
The application of the Special Economic Zone, as proposed by the Minister of Economic Development, Trade, is designed to have a mechanism to move with speed. Now, what is relevant, and it has always been disconnected from questions on the SEZ concept, is that everything we're enabling, like we're proposing legislation that then gives government the capacity to build a regulation. Those regulations are publicly consulted. Those regulations are publicly facing. Those regulations are scrutinized by all. And so I will affirm to the member that the government will be judicious in the use, but that's not the intent. It's not the intent. The intent is to give the capacity of governments to move with an element of speed in areas of strategic importance or of national security importance, which we would submit the Ring of Fire, which is the first. But in order to get there, we're going to consult meaningfully. And that's an obligation that we intend to fulfill.
Well, Minister, I hear that. And when I read this bill, what I see here, enabling legislation, going to regulation, but what I see a lot through this bill, again, is trust me, right? Trust us. Trust that the government will do the right thing. Trust us that we will not put certain people ahead of others. Trust us that we will do the right thing. Given this government's track record, to be frank, I think it's hard for many Ontarians to trust you. And I find it ironic that in one part of your deputation, Minister, you refer to the current situation in Ontario in terms of economic development as the Wild West. But that's exactly what you're trying to create. You're trying to create through Bill 5 the Wild West. So my question, Minister, I would like to know further about when we look again, back to Schedule 9. So these trusted proponents, right now, Minister, in your mind, do you have the name of one company whom in your mind today that you believe is or would be or considered a trusted proponent?
What's proposed before the House is a commitment to build a regulatory framework that is in the public interest. So the answer to the question is there is not an example one would cite today because the bill hasn't even gone to consultation yet, which would seem to be negate the whole premise of your opposition to it because we haven't heard from the people. So of course we're not going to apply the principle without hearing from the communities impacted. So this goes on, there's a public posting, there's a public consultation, people get a say.
But they voted against meaning in Funnel Bay.
Yes, I want to believe we would agree amongst more mainstream political parties that there are good corporate socially responsible actors in Ontario, especially in the mining sector, in the forestry sector, in the energy sector. We are a world-class Tier 1 mining nation. We should be proud of that. 25% of mining GDP happens in this province. Thousands of jobs. The future of the clean economy that some in this room may aspire to, the EVs they may drive today to come to Queen's Park, was built from minerals coming out of China that have no environmental, no labor standards, use coal power. So let's not pretend the choice isn't binary for us as Canadians. It's either we step it up, or the Chinese or nations like that, or the mines of Africa that are literally exploited, when we use these words so casually, prevail. So we choose Canada, and we do so while maintaining environmental rigor, strengthening compliance, and sending a message of zero tolerance to those who dare violate the law or put someone at risk. You will go to jail. You will face million-dollar penalties, stronger than the ones your government had when they were there. So I actually think this is a movement in the right direction, and we're not going to prejudice the application of the policy because we want to hear from the people impacted.
Well, Minister, I hear you, and I thank you for your response. But frankly, when you talk about, our opponents that we're racing against, like China and their regulatory regime, our standards should never be set to what China's doing, right? To what countries like that are doing. And I sat through the debates in the House where China was given as an example of a special economic zone by your party, by a member of your party, an example of what we're modeling. That happened. I was sitting in the House, and that was said.
If we can just put that on hold, time on hold. I'd like to remind the observers that are here in this room today that you are observers and you are welcome to be here. However, I do request that you refrain from clapping or participating in any manner. Thank you. My apologies, Minister. Please continue.
Is there something not democratic about Italy or Singapore or Australia? Like, actually, I'd like to understand. Amongst these OECD nations, is there something that is authoritarian in those democracies? How about Ireland or South Korea?
Sorry, Minister, first
or
of all,
Spain? Or
I'm not here deputizing to take questions. You are, as the Minister,
No, but you've
frankly.
asserted that the inspiration is an
No,
authoritarian
I'm repeating
regime
what you're saying and what
which-
my colleagues are saying, Minister.
To my colleague, I have
sorry,
never
sorry.
made that claim. The government's inspiration is to decouple from geopolitical threats, which is why the legislation allows us to procure away from China. It's why we've been intentional in our procurement strategy. On the U.S. side, it's why we've announced a $20 billion procurement to deny them from our supply chains. It's why there's no American booze in the LCBO. I mean, all these things add up to a broader theme of defending the country against risks. So, look, I hear you. And I'm suggesting, no, hear it from the author of this of the provision specific to the SEZs, which is Minister Fedeli. He would be inspired by the Italies or the Singapores.
Thank you,
or
Minister. That ends the round of questions to the third party. We will now move on to round 2 of questions from the government side. And I recognize MPP Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the Minister. As I was listening to you, I thought about all these rules and regulations that have been brought through over the years. And I thought, the last 30 to 40, 50 years ago, people were bringing in more rules and more regulations. And I wondered, did they ever realize what they were doing? And I think over time, it was just one more layer, one more layer, one more layer. And in some ways, I feel almost like a death of 1,000 cuts. And I think this is where this bill's maybe going. And what I'd like to ask you, what is the one project, one process approach, and how does it differ from what's being done now?
how much time do I have? Because I feel like I was way too
5
long
minutes
on the
and
former
54
member.
seconds.
5 minutes?
Yep.
Oh
More
my
than
God, I'm
5
going to
minutes.
time myself. Okay, colleagues, the current process, when I use the language, that was cited by the honourable member, the point is that literally there is no accountability mechanism on ministries or public servants or politicians who make a decision. So it can take, and there are many examples where it took 1,000+ days for the Ministry of whatever, natural resources, environment, energy, and formerly mines, to make an assessment when we know it could be done in hundreds of days. So it's not serving the economic interests of Ontario if we don't put some accountability on government. This is not impinging anyone else's rights. It's actually looking inwards to say, could we be better at this? Could we smarten up and understand there's a threat but an opportunity on the horizon for Canada to seize? A message echoed by the national government today. So one project, one process is a long-standing priority of job creators in the province. And if we want to be competitive, yes, we need to move with speed, yet while maintaining environmental protection, while respecting the Constitution, while fully discharging meaningfully the duty to consult. We can do both. So one project, one process in in a 30-second final, it is the shepherding of a permit across the enterprise of government led by the Ministry of Energy and Mines, taking responsibility to get it done. And we impose deadlines on government, not on anyone else. No consultation is curtailed, no deadline is imposed on anyone but the public service and politicians, so that when we make decisions, we do it with a sense of a bias of action. But we still consult, and we still, of course, discharge the duties that are constitutionally protected under law. And I think that aim is good for Canada. It is good for Ontario. It is how we become self-reliant and end dependence from anyone, let alone President Trump or President Xi. It doesn't actually matter. And that's what we're trying to do.
I recognize MPP Cusetto.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank the two ministers for being here. You know, in Ontario, you were saying that it takes 15 to 17 years to develop a mine. And, you know, today we depend on jurisdictions around the world for cobalt. I always like to talk about cobalt because a lot of people don't realize that 13 pounds of cobalt that is in your vehicle, 75% of it comes from the Congo, right? And in the Congo, they use child labor. And there's a book written called Cobalt Red. It's by a professor from Harvard that wrote, and it says how the blood of Congo powers our lives here in the world. So how can we pivot from taking 15 to 17 years to develop a mine here in Ontario, and instead of depending on minerals from jurisdictions around the world that use child labor?
I have made this point, and we have made this point as a government. The binary choices before the world. The overwhelming majority of rare earths in the European Union are Chinese imports. I believe it's over 90%. I believe over 94% in the U.S. So the dependence on China, who through proxies owns and exploits resources across the world, notably in Africa, Indonesia, and other parts of the world, is deeply troubling as a Canadian and as a small d Democrat who went abroad in North Africa to promote democracy after the Arab Spring. This is a personal priority for us when it comes to the promotion of human rights. But let's not pretend, if we don't move with speed, that those nations, those violators of fundamental human rights and the dignity of the person will prevail, and they are prevailing. So we have an opportunity with the U.S., whose Department of Defense has expressed real interest in our resources. We have an opportunity in the Asia-Pacific. We have an opportunity with Europe, who's looking for credible, dependable partners. And the one project, one process, yes, moves with an element of speed. It really puts pressure on government while maintaining rigor. And that's what we're trying to do today. I'll finally add, when you look at the energy supply, roughly 86% of Ontario's energy is generated from non-emitting sources. We have one of the cleanest grids on the entire world. An amazing story. And yet we have nations building coal plants a week. So the supply chains undermine our workers.
There was an article about
the energy sources are fundamentally dirtier. The standards are subpar by any industrialized standard. So it begs the question, if not now, when? If not us, who will win the day? And on mining, on critical minerals, on these projects, I just want to remind my colleagues and us all that the EV revolution, the entrance of the clean energy economy is entirely predicated on access to minerals. It is ever so ironic that a battery being used by Canadians, right, under the guise of doing the right thing for the environment, feeling good about it, investing your hard-earned dollars, only to find out that, like all of your batteries, colleagues, and all the folks in the room today who drove here, potentially in an EV, it didn't come from a democratic nation. It didn't come from a rules-based nation. So let's acknowledge that.
Minister, that's the end of round 2 for the government side. We will now move to round 2 of questions for the official opposition, and I recognize MPP Glover.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here today. First of all, I just want to state that I reject the premise that the only way to grow our economy is to undermine our democracy with Bill 5. For 7 years, this government's been in power. They have overridden our charter rights. They have overridden our protections under the Human Rights Code. They've overridden our rights to democratic municipal elections, and the Premier has boldly said that he wants to appoint partisan conservative judges. And the result of this, all of this was done in the name of growing our economy and building housing. But the result is that we have the second lowest number of housing starts of any province in the country, and we have the second highest unemployment rate of any province in the country. So the strategy that you've been using, that you're using again with Bill 5, has not been working. There are no mines at Ontario Place, but the trial balloon for Bill 5 was Bill 154, which overrode the municipal and provincial laws for the Ontario Place project. Now you're introducing Bill 5, which will allow any minister to override municipal and provincial laws in any so-called special economic zone in Ontario. Ontarians elect municipal governments who, in consultation with communities, make bylaws. Do you realize how profoundly undemocratic Bill 5 is to allow a minister by fiat to override those bylaws, as well as our democratically created provincial laws?
The Ministry of Infrastructure has brought forth a policy to open Ontario Place for public use after decades of it sitting idle. And I may turn to some of my officials in the public service who are part of the process, but what I can simply say is I know, without a doubt, that this project has received 40 detailed studies and reports. I know that there are strong environmental protections in place at all stages. I also know, when complete, that the project will be the largest public park in the downtown core.
They eliminated
and it will serve generations of
trees.
families. And so, yes, I appreciate the importance of listening to communities, and I also appreciate the importance of implementing a vision for reform, because I haven't heard one Ontarian or one Torontonian say, keep it idle. I've heard from people who want us to move to get the project done following assessments, following public consultations.
To my colleagues. Thank you.
Sorry, I recognize MPP Mamakwa.
Very good, Chair. I know time and time again, both of you as ministers have told me that this bill won't impact the duty to consult. But what I'm finding, though, is that you're not listening to First Nations in the first place. Former Chief Chris Monias from Niskanaga has shared this, quote, "As of right now, there hasn't been any consultation nor accommodation to Niskanaga people. What are the real benefits of allowing development up in our area, and what are the real impacts? There's social impacts, there's environmental impacts. What's going to happen to our river? It surely will impact our treaty rights and our title to the land," end quote. What I'm hearing, Minister, is rights holders in Ontario are telling you that this bill does impact the duty to consult. Not only that, but they're also telling you that you've already failed at this duty by pushing through this legislation without their input. Minister, I ask both of you, are you saying that these First Nations are wrong?
I recognize Minister Beveridgeford.
Well, thank you. I know the member has studied what the duty to consult as a matter of law means for the federal parliament and provincial parliaments. Obviously, the prevailing duty for any government is to table legislation and then begin the duty to consult. I not only look forward to, and I know the Minister and I have talked about this, the feedback that we get here at committee, but then embarking on
beginning
obviously a
only
political
after
consultation and engagement,
the legislation?
and the technical elements of the duty to consult. I would refer the member to Mikisew First Nation versus Canada, where the Supreme Court of Canada was clear and absolute that the government's duty to consult is triggered by the tabling of legislation. And that's precisely what is happening here in some form. Obviously, the broader opportunities of this particular bill are being discussed by both sides and interpreted. But the duty to consult is something different, and it's something that we have gone to great lengths in the bill to be explicit about. Not only is it protected, but in my respectful view, it will be enhanced. My comments earlier, previous governments, including ones that I have been involved with, have seen major resource development projects occur in Northern Ontario, particularly in the far north, and they simply
Sorry,
have
Minister,
not
I
included
recognize,
the opportunity.
MPP Makwa. Sorry, Minister. Sorry, Minister. Thank you, Minister.
I think living there and growing up there is very different. Yeah, so I think when you say trigger, this bill triggers the duty to consult.
That's correct.
Does that mean there will be changes? You will accept the amendments from the First Nations?
Questions, the second round of questions for the official opposition. We will now move to the second round of questions for the third party, and I recognize MPP Manahan.
McMahon. We're going to be rapid fire because I only have a short period of time and I have a zillion questions to ask you. So we're starting with science. So we have the Endangered Species Act, which is working well, but it is being destroyed, and a new one is coming in place that you're creating called the Species Conservation Act. In that act, a species will be protected where it sleeps and where it lays its eggs, and nothing in between. So you, Minister, you get your bedroom, you get to keep that. You don't get stairs, you don't get a kitchen, a living room, you get the local hospital where you can birth your babies. How do you expect a species to survive and thrive with that new legislation?
I appreciate the member's question. I would like to call upon the Assistant Deputy Minister from the Ministry of Environment and Conservation to explain the current system, the new system, and to give some assurances that the system remains rigorous in protecting species at risk. Thank you.
To say your name for the record there, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's Chloe Stewart. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, Land and Water Division. Thank you. So the proposed legislation really focuses on scoping the definition of habitat compared to the previous legislation. So it includes clear parameters focusing on core elements such as breeding, rearing, staging, wintering, and hibernation areas to provide greater clarity to proponents when they're taking the required protection steps as part of the following the rules and regulation process.
Okay. So next question, can someone, with this new act, could someone just go out and kill an endangered species? And what is stopping me from doing that?
So that is a prohibition in the Species Conservation Act.
What are the repercussions?
There's a number of enforcement provisions in the new Species Conservation Act, including order provisions that would enable a provincial offences officer to stop you from doing that.
And in your experience, do discretionary provisions work to protect species?
Well, it's across Canada, a number of jurisdictions use discretionary protections. So, for example, the Federal Species at Risk Act. Well, you can look at their evaluation of their legislation.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Dresden landfill. So this is actually complete trash. So you have your own, the local MPP is against this. The community is against it. You guys said a year ago you thought an environmental assessment was necessary. The Premier said that. So absolutely, we want to be responsible for our trash. I feel there are other ways, like tightening up EPR regulations. educational awareness for people, maybe starting with composting at Queen's Park, which we don't have, but stay tuned for that. Do you not think would be quicker, smarter, more logical to utilize existing landfills, right? So for an existing landfill, you can grant a temporary exemption to receive more materials. Why not do that?
So I think a material change that transpired over the past year is the election of President Trump. The fact that he can, and he has, including during the pandemic, closed the border for essential materials that save lives. 40% of waste is going to Michigan and New York. The governor of the state of Michigan has proposed a 1,288% increase per tonnage to waste. As I understand, this particular location already has waste permissions. It's not a new landfill. But with that said, it is still going to fall under a environmental compliance approval. And I would ask the officials if they'd be so kind, if one of my colleagues from the ministry could underscore what an environmental compliance approval looks like. Because I think it's a subject of debate that there isn't oversight or rigor, and I respectfully will challenge that. And I would like a public servant to dispassionately explain what that means for Dresden and for all landfills that are falling under the ECA. So if Chair would turn to an official to explain that on the record.
But another question for you, Minister, is why this particular landfill in Dresden? There are, 5,000 closed landfills in Ontario. Why Dresden? What is the allure and excitement with Dresden?
The Ministry of the Environment and Conservation Parks has identified this particular location because they believe it is the fastest increase Ontario's internal waste capacity, which reduces us on international reliance. With that said, though, I believe it is germane to your first question that we understand what an environmental compliance approval is, and I would like that on the record. And Chair, I would like the ADM to come forth and briefly explain what that means.
Hold my time.
ADM, come forth.
A minute left.
Okay, well, I'll proceed with you.
Yeah.
Obviously, I respect the member, but in 30 seconds, it would be helpful to get it on the record. Let's assure us that there is rigor, there is an oversight mechanism, there's science-based, it's scientific, it's apolitical. So if an ADM would be so kind to, they may be with us virtually, actually. Okay.
Could have the ADM come up. I think they're virtual. Thank you very much.
You're holding my time?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm at 2 minutes.
I'm at 30 seconds.
Triple M's never been good with math, I think. But
I've only spoken for 2 minutes, I think. Right?
I'm going by the total sum here.
All right.
Okay, please recognize, if we can recognize your name and your position, please.
Absolutely. My name is Lisa Trevisan. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks for environmental assessment and approvals. To be very clear, this is not a closed landfill, nor is it a new landfill. It is an existing landfill. And to the member's point, yes, one of the things that government can do is allow an existing landfill to change its operations, to expand.
I'm sorry, ADM, we are at the conclusion of round 2 of questions for the third party, and we will be moving to the next presenter. So I would like to thank both Minister Lecce and Minister Reckford for their presentations and answering questions today for the committee. And given that our presenters will have to be coming into the room, we're going to take a quick 5-minute recess to assemble. Thank you.
I might go to different screens, otherwise I'll get the I'll get the music. Let me see here. Yeah, so that was interesting. Yeah, so a lot of questions about Indigenous rights, There was questions about label regulations. At the end, there was a question of it got cut off because of the deadline, but environmental assessment specifically about the Dresden landfill, and I think Ontario Place got mentioned. Treaty 9 is it's surprising that the minister was dismissive of didn't know about Treaty 9, or seemed not to know, specifically as the Ring of Fire is in Treaty 9 largely. And they're using the government is using the Canadian government definition of duty to consult and going through it seems like the minimum requirements. Yeah, what did you think? Yes, I'm gonna go on a. There's some heated exchanges. I am surprised that some of the emissions, species recovery, didn't get mentioned, and harassment. Getting rid of harassment didn't get mentioned. Maybe it will be mentioned in this round. I won't have time to talk about everything today. And go look at all the committees, but I'll go on a break. Yeah, I would like to recognize Nanny James 012. And I can reply in chat. I don't know if you're still watching. I'm just taking a break, but I will reply in chat.
The government members, 2 rounds of 6.5 minutes for the official opposition members, and 2 rounds of 6.5 minutes for the third party. Yes, MPP Glover.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I've been asked to request that Sandy Lake First Nation Cynthia Fiddler and Adam Fiddler present together.
Okay. Thank you. That's fine. PP's out.
Thank you, Chair. I'm requesting that for Sandy Lake First Nation, Cynthia Fiddler and Adam Fiddler present together.
Thank you. Is there an agreement of the committee? Yes, great, thank you. Okay, so welcome. And we will start with the Ontario Mining Association. If you could please state your name for the Hansard, and you may begin.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Priya Tandon, President of the Ontario Mining Association. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Standing Committee on the Interior and speak to Bill 5. Our members believe this bill's key mining-related elements are vital to enhancing Ontario's economic competitiveness and unlocking the potential of its minerals sector. The OMA was established in 1920 to represent the mining industry in the province and is one of the longest-serving trade organizations in the country. We represent over 80 members engaged in environmentally responsible mineral production and processing, as well as suppliers, contractors, environmental consultants, and others involved in the sector. At the core of our mission to enhance Ontario's mining sector competitiveness is a foundation of collaboration and respect. Our members prioritize protecting people's health and safety, honoring Indigenous rights, and safeguarding the environment for future generations. We believe that this responsible approach not only aligns with our values, but also provides a significant competitive advantage in the global marketplace. Our members produce the building blocks of modern life and innovation that the world needs. The Ontario mining sector supplies domestic and international markets with a diverse array of metals and minerals, including precious and base metals, non-metallic minerals, as well as key battery supply chain minerals. Looking ahead, OMA members who include active operating mines in the province, as well as some mines that are nearing construction, are poised to support the development of renewable and advanced manufacturing technologies in Ontario. The potential is transformational, but we need government in alignment with this end goal to make it a reality, particularly when we are in a geopolitical climate of uncertainty. We are encouraged that this government has signaled its intention to strengthen Ontario's economy at home first. Effective and proportional regulation is an essential part of good governance and plays an important role in fostering responsible mineral development. However, the key to competitive success in the complex environment we operate in today is to minimize the time and money spent accessing services and navigating government processes. Bill 5 represents a positive step forward, and its success will depend on adequate resourcing and careful, thoughtful implementation. Given the substantial scope of this task and what is happening in the current geopolitical context, the urgency to act cannot be overstated. Currently, permitting a major mine in Ontario can take up to 15 years, with every stage and aspect of the mining process governed by comprehensive and sometimes duplicative regulations. For example, a representative Ontario mine might require over 20 permits from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks alone, which may in some cases be sequential and not allow for concurrent work. These duplicative efforts may have the direct cause of delaying and deferring crucial investments. The OMA supports legislative measures that establish clear service standards for processing times and supports moving towards an integrated, coordinated approach where all relevant ministries review projects concurrently, supported by dedicated project management to streamline approvals and reduce delays. The hard work in getting to organizational change and coordination will be in the details, and we are keen to work with the respective ministries to make this a success. For example, the proposed regulatory framework will be able to prescribe service standards for review times within any ministry concerning designated projects. In our view, mining projects across Ontario should be considered priorities, and all should benefit from improved service standards and review times. The success of one mining project signals future success for all, attracting more investment and creating more certainty in the sector. Our membership is diverse, and we maintain that given mining's strategic role in the economy, the sector as a whole should be viewed as a priority, and these changes should be commodity and project agnostic. We welcome the introduction of a one project, one process approach. This concept brings provincial ministries together in a whole-of-government approach. As such, it's a step towards affirming mining as a strategic priority. Thoughtful, well-resourced implementation is essential to transforming this vision into a reality. We are committed to working with government to ensure we see the process changes required to deliver results and that ministers have clear mandates and robust staffing to ensure capacity to deliver on this one project, one process concept. We also emphasize that continued collaboration and alignment with federal authorities is crucial to effectively address intergovernmental permitting processes. Relationships matter. Our members recognize the importance of meaningful Indigenous consultation and upholding the duty to consult. Building partnerships with a genuine approach to mutual benefits is essential for our sector. We value economic reconciliation and remain respectful of Section 35 rights. We know the future of economic reconciliation lies in opportunities like procurement and equity partnerships that are the touchstone of our relationship going forward. We were pleased to see government investing new resources and opportunities for Indigenous equity partnerships and capacity funding in last week's Ontario budget. The OMA is clear that our members will maintain operational practices related to any delegated
1 minute remaining.
procedural aspects of consultation with Indigenous communities. Transparency, consistency, and community engagement remain foundational to our shared success. With respect to one project, one process, we appreciate the intent to coordinate Crown consultations, and this should not be limited exclusively to designated projects with delivery teams. Coordinated, effective, and respectful consultation efforts should be extended to all mining projects. A clear, coordinated approach needs to be implemented to avoid duplication and further delays, and to refrain from inundating Indigenous communities with over 20 different consultation requests for essentially one project. At its core, we believe this enabling legislation facilitates ongoing dialogue and collaborative efforts between the ministry and the expert practitioners within the OMA. We stand ready to work with Indigenous community partners, governments, and stakeholders to refine and implement a framework that effectively balances efficiency with environmental and social responsibility. Our shared goal is to ensure Ontario remains an attractive destination.
For your presentation, we will now move to Sandy Lake First Nation. If you could please state your name for Hansard, and you may begin.
Bonjour. Greetings, all my relations. I thank God for this day. My name is Cynthia Fiddler. I am from Sandy Lake.
My name is Cynthia Fiddler, and I'm from Sandy Lake, Ontario. I'm an elected leader in Sandy Lake First Nation. Earlier I said Ndoe Magnag. Ndoe Magnag means all my relations. But when we take it to ceremony, it encompasses more than that. It encompasses our relationship to the land, to all living things, and to the water, and to the plants, and even the wind. Our relationship to the land is important to us. We as Anshiniwag were placed where we are placed to protect her and take care of her. First, we are children of the land. We learn from the land, we play, and we explore. And the laws of nature gives us lessons. She teaches us and disciplines us, which then teaches us the respect we need to protect her. This is why the people of Kiiwetinoong love the land so much. And this is why it's important for me to come and travel like 15,000 kilometers to be here with you to say that. 1,500. Oh, sorry. But it's like going to Florida. You guys go to Florida. But, you know, I traveled a long way to say this. So this is an across-the-board principle for us. And I want to tell you about an elder, Sidney Fiddler. Right now, the Old Barons mine is a big mess. There's nothing but yellow tailings. I visited personally. The air smells dead. The vegetation is not nice. And this is something we have been asking as Sandy Lake for this government to clean up for years. Fast track that. Fast track the cleanup. You know, we were told that they need to do environmental studies to clean up. Why can't that be fast tracked? So that mine was opened, sorry, I'm a little nervous. That mine was opened in 1939, and it took a lot of gold, a lot of silver, and a lot of minerals. Some people got very rich off this mine, but we didn't. An elder once told me the benefit that we got was going to get the scraps from the miners that were there. This is wrong. This is wrong. This bill, this fast tracking, that's not what we want. We want to protect our land, and we will support Canada in your fight with, uniting, but it can't be at the expense of our lands and our families. That's not something that you'll have permission to do without our consultation. Mia Migach.
My name is Adam Fiddler. I greet you all. I'm from Sandy Lake. My English name is Adam Fiddler. I work for the people of Sandy Lake as a lawyer. I have been chief in the past. What Cynthia is talking about is the land. Those are our lands that you're talking about. And the land where we live on, there was nobody else there. There's nobody else living there. It's the Anishinaabe who live there, the people that live there. Nobody else has lived there. And our language comes from the land. This is not your land. It belongs to the Anishinaabe. The land that you guys are talking about, and the water you talk about, and the environment, and everything included in that. Our Creator gave everything to the people to live a life. He gave them everything they can do to survive. And He also gave them their culture. That is the indigenous law, as I call it, our inherent right. No one can take that away from us. Our inherent right, it is very sacred. Our inherent right is sacred. We were also given the opportunity to protect the land for future generations, the children, to leave something behind for them, to have a life. We have our own laws on how we protect the land. We also have what you have when you talk about your laws. We are always reminded that no one can speak for the water, the air, the environment, the fish, birds, the animals. But we as Anishinaabe people are given that responsibility to speak on their behalf, to be their voice. That is one of our laws, to look after. You also have laws. Our laws are similar, to look after the land, to protect the land, and to think of all living beings, including the animals. With what you're trying to do, you're trying to throw away your environmental law to have economic development on those lands. And that is one of the things we're concerned about, because it comes close to our land. We have seen what has happened with the land destroyed in the past, and now we're told that's over 100 years ago where that destruction took place. So my phone just reminded me.
And now we will move to the Toronto Zoo. Please state your name for the answered, and you may begin.
Good morning, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Dolph DeYoung, and I'm the CEO of Your Toronto Zoo. And joining me virtually is Dr. Gabriela Mastromonaco, our Chief Science Officer. We're here on behalf of our board, staff, volunteers, the 3,000 animals who call your zoo home, and here to speak for the endangered species we've spent decades trying to protect. The vision of your Toronto Zoo is simple: a world where people, wildlife, and wild spaces thrive. And today we're concerned because Bill 5 may not protect the balance of those pieces, and quite frankly, may put our vision in jeopardy due to habitat loss and moving away from provincial recovery strategies. This bill, if passed, could undo decades of conservation efforts and threaten some of Ontario's most vulnerable species. Species your Toronto Zoo works directly for. And these are species who can't speak for themselves, including the eastern loggerhead shrike, Blanding's turtles, Massasauga rattlesnake, boreal caribou, and more. And these are not just names in a report. They're living, breathing parts of Ontario's natural heritage and part of our identity. These are species we've been working for decades with communities, partners, and governments of all stripes, including yours, to protect. At your Toronto Zoo, our mission is connecting people, animals, conservation science, and traditional knowledge in the fight against extinction. And we believe economic growth and environmental protection can and must go hand in hand. Bill 5 tells a different story, and that's why we're speaking to this legislation today. As this bill eliminates the Endangered Species Act and removes automatic habitat protection, replacing it with voluntary measures. It reduces the role of science in decision-making processes, leaving species listings vulnerable. And it may only consider protections and orders if a development would eliminate the last of an individual species from Ontario, not if it significantly harms or fragments their habitat. As currently composed, we're concerned this act will result in the erosion of biodiversity and the loss of species at risk. Ontario's long been a leader in conservation, and I do not believe our government's goal is to change the definition of habitat to exclude spaces animals critically need to survive. We do recognize the bill's commitment to enforcement, critical to protect the remaining species, and we do support swift and strong action against offenders. That said, we are concerned to see this legislation coming forward at a time where there's also rollbacks in endangered species protections in the United States. I think we all understand that endangered species don't recognize political boundaries, and these policy changes makes their survival on both sides of the border more questionable. And in a world with a changing climate, protecting species at the edges of their ranges has never been more important. Take the Blanding's turtle as an example. Together with Parks Canada, your Toronto Zoo has helped release more than 700 individuals into Rouge National Urban Park. And while they may not move quickly, these turtles travel up to 6 kilometers a year around the watershed as they move between nesting, feeding, and hibernation sites. Any move that could limit protections to where they're found and specific movements during their life cycle fails to reflect how they live, their need for a wide range of spaces, and what we need to do to conserve them. The same applies to the eastern loggerhead shrike, a migratory bird that relies on habitat that goes well beyond the nest, but on grasslands, thorny shrubs, and migratory stopovers found across our province, all critical for them to survive. In partnership with Wildlife Preservation Canada, we've raised, reared, and released over 200 shrikes to protect and reinforce their populations. These initiatives, along with habitat restoration work, are deliberate, evidence-based, provincially driven recovery strategies that are preventing extinction. The changes proposed in Bill 5 will undermine this work. And it's sad to think about Ontario potentially being the weakest link in this migratory bird's incredible journey between here and the southern United States. The eastern Massasauga rattlesnake is another species that is likely to be profoundly impacted by this legislation. Working with partners, our teams has raised dozens of baby rattlesnakes as part of groundbreaking recovery initiatives. And the reality is, without connected habitat and an ongoing commitment to this recovery strategy, they will not survive in the wild in parts of this province, no matter how many we raise and release from your zoo. And the final species I need to speak for today are boreal caribou. These iconic animals depend on large, intact forests, and research has demonstrated that even small amounts of fragmentation of the range will increase calf mortality. Our zoo is proud to lead genomic analysis and biobanking efforts to help understand and protect these caribou. But that work may not matter if the habitat they need to survive in is negatively impacted. So we're proud of this work, as well as our partnerships we have made, including with this government, to support these species. And we also have a fantastic track record of developing made-in-Ontario science and conservation technologies to help us protect species, support communities, and ensure benefits for local economies. That said, these tools depend on real habitat protection at scale. And I need to repeat this simple fact. We cannot fight the extinction of species in Ontario if they have nowhere to live. So we're not here today to defend the status quo, as almost all agree the existing legislative framework also was not successfully implemented to protect species at risk. We are also not against the changes serving environment and speeding up processes for the economy. Unfortunately, Bill 5 will not address endangered species issues and comes at a steep ecological, community, and economic costs. So we urge the committee to reject the removal of the Endangered Species Act. As currently written, the bill will undermine species protection at a time where we need to restore and strengthen science-based decision-making rooted in deep and meaningful community consultation. If the government decides to move forward, as written, we have one ask. Establish an insurance policy for these species and their well-being. This government needs to commit to funding to create an Ontario Wildlife Biobank at your Toronto Zoo. Our reproductive science team can play a critical role working with partners across all walks of life to ensure we have a backup plan for future generations. This isn't a question of choosing between conservation and development.
Presentation. We will now move to the first round of questions, and this will start with the official opposition members, and I recognize MPP Mamwaka.
Thank you. I will say the people from Sandy Lake, if you want to finish what you want to say, to finish it. I am grateful to hear the language as you're presenting to us at the Senate Committee. Please finish what you wanted to say. Thank you, Saul Memekwe, for allowing me to finish the law that I'm talking about. As I said, you also have your laws, and we will not allow you to protect our laws. We will not allow you to destroy our lands. You will have to follow Indigenous law. And I would like to remind you, there are a lot of people out there looking for, doing mineral exploration, and then we have Frontier Lithium up there. Frontier Lithium is trying to understand the thought process of our people, the laws. They are going slowly, and they're asking us what laws they need to follow. And they are trying to understand where we're coming from. And that is the priority for them to try and understand. And that is where we're trying to teach them our law. If something is going to happen on Indigenous land, we need to let them know what they need to follow. Right now, they're sounding like they want to follow our law, and it is good if that happens. I am not saying that we're going to allow them to start a mine. What I'm saying is we are trying to teach them, and they are trying to follow Indigenous law as our God has left us as our inherent right. If you allow your law, it is now a step backwards. I know that Ontario is excited to have Frontier start their project, even though they're doing things carefully and slowly. And if you change your law, and the laws will have taken a step backward. And that's what I would like to caution you. One of our elders always tell us, be cautious. And I'll say to you, you have your own laws. You cannot interfere with Canada's law. They also have authority. And I will say today, you cannot touch Indigenous law. You cannot break it. I would like to caution you in peace. And to know that this is our inherent right from our God, and we will stand on that. And he asks, what are we supposed to do? If you're going to change your law, you cannot are able to deal with indigenous law. You can write it into your law. We will follow indigenous law. You can say that. If you don't do that, and if you try to push this forward, we will have problems. Just to know there are no other people on our lands. It's the Anishinaabe who will stand up for their inherent right. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Saul, for allowing me to finish my presentation.
Adam.
Thank you, Adam and Cynthia, for coming here. Well, because this is where you live, in Sandy Lake. I know you travel and that you use the land. And I know what the proposed law Ontario is trying to put into place. And they're trying to push this forward. Likely in next week or in 2 weeks, it will pass. That's what I see. I asked the government today. It is as if they are not dealing with our people. This is what I'm understanding, is that they think that they're doing good, but they are not. Our people are not being heard. That's what I'm thinking. I don't. What will happen if this goes through? What will the people do who live in the north if this passes?
Can I call a point of order just for a second? I can hardly hear the interpretation. Is there any way we could get it louder? Because I really do want to hear what you're having to say. But is it, because it wasn't very loud before.
Are you at max volume?
I think I am.
Okay, yeah. I'll check.
Yeah.
Thank you. The indigenous law that I speak about, that it needs to be followed. It is paramount, and if we don't follow that, there will be different things happening. As a child, those are teachings that I have, that if we follow something that you're taught, something negative will happen. I cannot say what will happen, what will go wrong if this continues. That's what I'll say. I just am cautioning that I don't want any conflict, but if you move in that direction, that is where you're going to take it. However, I ask you not to go there, so that there is no conflict. Our people have hopes. You have your laws. Canada has their own laws, and also our people have their own laws. And you also have to follow those laws to work together.
That ends round one questions with the official opposition. We will now move to round one, questions with the government. And I recognize MPP Furin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, my question is for Priya with the Ontario Mining Association. I think the one silver lining that we can see in Donald Trump's attacks on Canada is that now leaders across the country are waking up, and we're starting to realize that we need to act faster and we need to move faster. Just today on my way here, I was reading Prime Minister Carney's mandate letter, and he says Canada, and I quote, "Canada must build an enormous amount of new infrastructure at speeds not seen in generation. This includes infrastructure to diversify our trading relationships, to become an energy superpower in both clean and conventional energies." My question is, how will Bill 5 accelerate the timeline of which mining permits are issued, and is this necessary compared to the current standards?
Well, I think Bill 5, and I spoke a bit about it in terms of my remarks, but the focus on one project, one process, I think that can go a long way, if it's done in partnership. And that's what our membership is looking for, and that's what the legislation also indicates, and the minister has indicated that putting together a dedicated project management team within the ministry and giving them some leadership to undertake the process of permitting for projects and take a whole of government approach will be a huge step. And keeping in mind that government and companies are going to uphold their Section 35 constitutional obligations, I think is key to ensuring that this is done in a respectful way that respects safety and the environment as a core value for the mining sector. And so right now, as I mentioned, if I give you an example of a mining company, working on a permit or working on some sort of approval with government, and whether it's with the Ministry of Mines or the Ministry of Environment, many calls are had, many meetings are had to ensure that baseline studies are correct, to ensure that data being collected are correct. And that's very important work. But more coordination needs to be done to minimize the time it takes to get from one desk to another, and to ensure that ministries are talking to each other to streamline some of those permits and ensure that once proponents get the work done and submitted to government, it doesn't take years to review it and come back with an answer. And so I think Bill 5, when it comes to the one project, one process approach that is being put forward, it can be very beneficial. And if it's done in the right way, and we're here at the table to work on the details with partners. So.
Thank you. I recognize MPP Scott.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. I would really like to kind of double click that and discuss a little bit further. Maybe you could explain for us in your own interpretation, for maybe those of us that haven't lived in or had to operate in the current ecosystem, how Bill 5 streamline some of those regulatory processes you're talking about, and how it's going to maintain a high standard of safety and environmental protections based off your understanding and experience, with your members on the kind of current state and the proposed future state. What, can you maybe give us a little more color on that?
Well, I think I mentioned on average it could take up to 15 years or more to build a mine in the province. And, if we're looking to build that economic prosperity in Ontario, we're going to have to build a mine a bit quicker and do it in a way that is not going to create the frustration that's in the system right now amongst proponents that are trying to do good things for the province and doing it in a respectful way. I think Ontario is known as a top jurisdiction when it comes to mining with respect to environmental regulations and safety standards and the historic relationships that many of our members have with Indigenous communities and new relationships that they're currently building. And our members don't want those impacted. And they don't want to have environmental regulations that are lax. They want to do the work that's required to maintain Ontario's reputation as a top jurisdiction to do mining. And that means more investment as well for them as companies, as global companies competing amongst themselves globally to get investment for Ontario operations. It's better for them from an economic perspective to continue to uphold those high standards from an environmental and a safety perspective. And having one project, one process in place and dedicated teams working with specific mining projects and companies to really hone in on getting the work done is going to be beneficial. And I think from a consultation perspective as well, we do hear from many Indigenous partners of the consultation fatigue that is out there. They're not only being asked to look into or consult on mining projects. There's other projects in the province that are also being worked on. And to go to an Indigenous community on permit by permit and ask to consult on each one, it does not work. So we need to fix it.
Thank you.
Yes, I recognize MPP Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. My question's to Mr. and Mrs. Fiddler. In the budget, maybe you aren't married. You're not a couple? Well, that's awkward. That's awkward. I apologize. I just assumed, and you should never assume. Okay, sorry again. In budget 2025, our government expanded the Indigenous Participation Fund to $70 million, which will include hiring mineral development advisors to support Indigenous communities.
Government's round one, and we are now going to go to round one of questions to the third party. I recognize MPP Zhao.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And I want to start by saying thank you to all our presenters here today. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially to our friends from Sandy Lake First Nation who've made the trip all the way here. We do appreciate it, so thank you again. My question I want to start off with is to Dolph from the Toronto Zoo. Dolph, you were ending your presentation talking about the establishment of an insurance policy, a biobank. Could you expand on that a bit and tell us a bit more?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. We believe that if this were to go forward, we need to be thinking about backup plans for species conservation and protecting species diversity. So establishing an Ontario Wildlife Biobank at a place like your Toronto Zoo, where our team already does protect and preserve reproductive material from across this country and beyond, actually. So this would ensure future species lifelines if they are impacted by climate change or biodiversity loss. And of course, we wouldn't do that in isolation. We have examples. We actually were recently with the Northern First Nations participating with them around caribou to make sure they have that insurance policy in place. And this actually could be a safeguard in addition to habitat protection that lets us make sure we have a backup plan. And we really talk about this not being a question of choosing between conservation and development. We really want to make sure nature is not seen as a barrier to progress. It's a foundation for it. And we see the need to break the status quo and the government's desire to go fast, but we want to make sure those animals can be protected in perpetuity. And this is a great tool to do that. And it's a conservation technology developed here in Ontario.
Well, thank you for that. And I just wanted to highlight for the committee, I obviously have a bit of a bias. I was on the board of the Toronto Zoo previous to this, so I do want to flag that. But the Toronto Zoo is one of the most well-respected institutions when it comes to conservation, endangered species protections, not just in Ontario and Canada, but around the world. So when we have such a respected body here raising such concerns about our environment, about endangered species, we need to be taking this seriously. So it's really alarming what we're reading here in Bill 5, and the red flags are being put up by the presenters here today, especially by the Toronto Zoo. In my own riding, turtles are talked about a lot. Not a lot of people think in Toronto that we have, this type of habitat, but these habitats are being threatened, and this bill does nothing to protect it. I would like to ask you if you could expand a bit on that topic. You spoke a bit about the turtles and definition of habitat. Can you expand a bit on that?
Yes, thank you for that. And I think it's really important we consider all of the biological needs of an animal during their lifespan. So whether they're migratory, whether they're local and transient, dietary changes over the season, in Canada what they need, in colder weather when you think of turtles and needing those ephemeral ponds in the spring differently than they need those stable water bottles in the fall to be able to get through the season. We need to make sure we take a holistic approach. And what's really important to us is, when we're not sure, we actually apply the precautionary principle. And again, I know that can slow things down, but I want to ensure we don't frame this as a conservation and species at risk problem. I think we've heard from the folks at the Mining Association, this is a collaboration problem that we can have thriving ecosystems, big, protected, safe blocks of habitats, and populations that aren't just surviving or being conserved, but are being restored to previous levels. I think that's the Ontario folks want to live in.
Thank you very much. You make an interesting point when you talk about applying a precautionary principle when we're talking about Bill 5 and its implications. When we talk about species protection, when we're talking about habitat protection, what is it in Bill 5 would you say would be the greatest red flags that you're reading right now, and what changes would you like to see made to the bill to make this difference?
I think the key piece for us is the elimination of the Endangered Species Act. There's a widespread agreement, I think, that it has not been applied effectively, but the tools in place are reactionary, and often that's too late. And yes, we want to count on industry partners doing things the right way, but for many of these species, it's going to be out of sight, out of mind, and off the planet, and it may be too late. So how do we have a system? We have governments at the provincial and federal level who are committed to collaborating. Let's not let species at risk be seen as the barrier to meaningful development and progress. We can do this. Ontario's been a home of incredible innovation for decades. There's no way we can say that we're not solving this economic crisis because we have a rare turtle in the area. If that's our biggest challenge, I think we've got to look in the mirror.
Thank you very much. For the rest of my time, I'd like to ask a question to our friends from Sandy Lake First Nation. One of the things that struck me the most in your deputation, you talked about the need to love and respect the land. I think it's clear in Bill 5 that this bill isn't about loving and respecting the land. It's about economic development. The minister was very clear. What is it in Bill 5 that you personally would like to see changed from the First Nation perspective and your First Nation perspective to make sure that we can actually love and respect the land in this bill?
Thank you for that question. The first thing that is paramount is looking after the land. I had said that it was your law, but we also have our own law. And if you want to change your law, at least to consider not to put back your environmental protections. That is one thing I would like to, one thing to be considered, that you do not go back what happened 100 years ago, where you came to destroy the land with the mines. It is starting to
well, I'm gonna
look better,
need to head
but
out.
your law.
Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day. I will hopefully stream other committees